Back in the 1950s, Hollywood was churning out films by the dozen, but few left a mark quite like Cry Terror. It wasn't just another thriller. It had suspense and a cast that lit up the screen. Among them was a 27-year-old rising star named Angie Dickinson. At the time, it was just another role in a growing career. But decades later, something unexpected happened. Angie recently revealed that she hadn't really watched Cry Terror in full since its release. But when she finally did, all these years later, she found herself in tears. And not just because of the film's tense storyline or her own youthful performance. The emotions ran deeper, rooted in memories, untold struggles, and a side of the movie the public never got to see. So what was it that hit her so hard after all these years? Was it the haunting plot? The weight of time? Or is there something more hidden behind the camera? Come with us as we step back into the golden age of cinema and uncover the forgotten truths behind one of Hollywood's earliest psychological thrillers. Angie Dickinson's humble beginnings. Angie Dickinson wasn't born a star, but she was born with the spark of one. She entered the world on September 30th, 1931, in the tiny town of Culm, North Dakota, as Angeline Brown, the middle of three daughters. Her parents, Leo Henry Brown and Frederica Hare, were German immigrants who originally bore the surname Braun. Catholic and hardworking, her father ran the Culm Messenger and Edgeley Mail, giving Angie an early introduction to the power of storytelling. When he moonlighted as the projectionist at the town's only movie theater, little Angie would sit in the dark, wide-eyed, falling in love with the magic of the silver screen. That theater eventually burned down, but the dream it sparked never did. In 1942, the Brown family packed up and moved west to Burbank, California, a move that would change everything. Angie was just 10. By 15, she had graduated from Bellarmine Jefferson High School, already showing early signs of ambition and intellect, having won a local Bill of Rights essay contest the year before. She studied at Immaculate Heart College in Los Angeles, and later graduated from Glendale Community College with a business degree by 1954. At first, she intended to follow in her father's footsteps and become a writer. Life had other plans. While juggling secretarial jobs, including one at the Lockheed Air Terminal and another in a parts factory, Angie married football player Gene Dickinson in 1952. She took his last name, and though the marriage didn't last forever, the name did. Beauty pageants opened unexpected doors. After placing second in a local Miss America preliminary, a casting agent took notice. That small spotlight led to a role as a showgirl on The Jimmy Durante Show, which caught the eye of television producers. One opportunity led to another, and suddenly, Dickinson found herself guest starring on major variety shows, including the Colgate Comedy Hour. Somewhere along the way, she met Frank Sinatra. He would become a lifelong friend, and in some ways, a mentor and a lover. Her first acting gig came on New Year's Eve 1954, in an episode of Death Valley Days. From there, she hustled, making appearances in everything from Gunsmoke and the Virginian to Perry Mason, Dr. Kildare, and The Fugitive. Her face was becoming familiar, her talent undeniable. One standout moment came in The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, where she played opposite James Mason and Stephen Hill in two separate episodes, showing early hints of her range and raw magnetism. By the mid-1950s, Angie was breaking into film. Her earliest roles were small and often uncredited. Lucky Me, 1954, The Return of Jack Slade, 1955, and Hidden Guns, 1956. Her first true starring role came in Gun the Man Down, 1956, alongside James Arness, but it was China Gate, 1957, a gritty war film by Sam Fuller that gave Angie her first taste of cult success. Unlike many of her blonde bombshell peers, Angie rejected the Marilyn Monroe mold. Studios brightened her naturally brunette hair to a soft honey blonde, but she refused to lean into the sex pot stereotype. She was never just arm candy, she wanted range and respect, and she got it. And then came Rio Bravo, 1959. It was the role that changed everything. Starring opposite John Wayne and Dean Martin, Dickinson played Feathers, a confident, flirtatious saloon girl with sharp wit and even sharper instincts. She oozed charm and sensuality, but never seemed desperate for attention. The performance launched her into stardom and cemented her as a new kind of sex symbol, one with class. Still, even success came with its obstacles. Under contract to Howard Hawks, Dickinson's momentum stalled when he sold her contract to Warner Brothers. Suddenly, she found herself stuck in supporting roles. She played Frank Sinatra's wife in Ocean's 11, 1960, and later co-starred in The Killers, 1964, with Lee Marvin and John Cassavetes. Working with Marlon Brando in The Chase, 1966, was another highlight, but by the late 60s, Dickinson was still waiting for that breakout that would make her a household name. Angie Dickinson in Policewoman. It came in the 70s, not on the big screen, but on television. In 1974, she became Suzanne Pepper Anderson in the groundbreaking crime drama Policewoman. The character had first been introduced in an episode of Police Story the year before. Pepper was tough but tender, clever but compassionate. She was sexy, yes, but she was also serious. A woman with a badge, a gun, and something to prove. Until then, TV women were either funny or flat. Pepper changed the game. Dickinson later said, "Before me, women were always funny, or they were just tough." Pepper was really a first. She was sexual, funny, and in control. The show ran until 1978, and with it, Angie became a pop culture icon. She also became a pin-up fantasy, especially after appearing in Roger Corman's Big Bad Mama, 1974, where her steamy scenes with William Shatner turned heads. She doubled down on her daring reputation in Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill, 1980, playing a sexually frustrated housewife whose brief affair leads to shocking consequences. It was bold, erotic, and unforgettable. Television remained her second home. She starred in the short-lived Cassie and Company in 1982 and, over the years, appeared in dozens of TV movies and miniseries. In 1993, she made a memorable return with Wild Palms, an edgy, surreal miniseries directed and produced by Oliver Stone. Dickinson played a seductive, dangerous villain, a reminder that even in her 60s, she still had that magnetic pull. Her film roles became less frequent in the 2000s, though she popped up in Pay It Forward, 2000, and Big Bad Love, 2001. But even without constant screen time, Angie Dickinson's legacy was already sealed. She was more than just the sultry voice, the honey blonde hair, or the fierce stare that could cut glass. Angie was a trailblazer. She carved out a path in both film and television when very few women had real power or presence. She challenged stereotypes, reinvented herself more than once, and left behind a career filled with characters that were as complex and compelling as she was. From small-town projectionist's daughter to one of Hollywood's most unforgettable women, Angie Dickinson didn't just act. She owned every room she walked into. What was Cry Terror about? In 1958, Angie Dickinson landed a supporting role in Cry Terror. Cry Terror is a 1958 crime thriller about a man and his family who get caught in a dangerous ransom plot, one he unknowingly helped create. Jim Molnar, played by James Mason, is an electronics expert. He designs a small device for what he thinks is a normal project, not realizing he's built a bomb. Paul Hoplin, played by Rod Steiger, is a clever and cold-hearted criminal who uses the device to make a powerful explosive. To prove how serious he is, Hoplin calls a major airline and claims there's a bomb on one of their planes. The plane lands safely, and the bomb is found and disarmed, just as Hoplin planned. It was never about the plane, it was about showing what he could do. Now, Hoplin wants $500,000. To pressure Jim, he kidnaps Jim, his wife Joan Molnar, played by Inger Stevens, and their young daughter Patty. The family is held in a New York City apartment guarded by two members of Hoplin's gang. Kelly, played by Angie Dickinson, who is his cool and confident girlfriend, and Vince, played by Jack Klugman, his nervous sidekick. Meanwhile, the FBI is racing to find them before it's too late. Hoplin sends Joan alone to collect the ransom. He warns her that her family will be harmed if she doesn't do exactly what he says. Joan, terrified but determined, agrees. Hoplin and another gang member named Steve, played by Neville Brand, hide out in a house in the Bronx. Steve is dangerous. He's addicted to Benzedrine and has a history of violence. When Joan shows up with the money, Steve tries to assault her. She fights back and kills him using a piece of broken glass. Hoplin then takes Joan to a new hideout in Lower Manhattan. To keep her in line, he lets her speak to her husband and daughter on the phone, just long enough to convince her they're still alive. But the FBI is getting closer. They identify Kelly using her dental records and head to the apartment where Jim and Patty are being held. There's a brief shootout. Kelly is wounded, and Vince is arrested. Joan sees a chance to escape. She runs out of the hideout and down into a subway station, with Hoplin chasing her. She slips and falls onto the tracks. Hoplin follows and steps on the third rail. He's electrocuted and killed instantly. The train stops just in time to avoid hitting Joan. Moments later, the police arrive, and she's finally safe. Cry Terror is a gripping story of a family trapped in a nightmare and how one woman's courage helped bring it to an end. But while Dickinson did a good job and smashed her role, you would not believe how she got it in the first place. How did Angie Dickinson land the role of Ellen Kelly in Cry Terror? Angie Dickinson was just 27 when she got the role of Ellen Kelly in Cry Terror. At the time, she was still trying to make a name for herself in Hollywood. She had done a few TV shows and small movie parts, but nothing big yet. Still, people were starting to notice her. The role of Ellen Kelly needed someone who could show both fear and strength. Angie had a calm, natural way about her that made her stand out. When she went in to audition, she didn't overdo it. She was just real, and that's what the filmmakers were looking for. It also helped that Angie could hold her own next to big stars like James Mason and Rod Steiger. Even though she wasn't as famous yet, she had a quiet confidence that made people pay attention. Getting that part didn't just move her career forward. It helped show the world what she could really do. And while Dickinson has had a stellar career, her marriages, on the other hand, haven't been quite as successful. What really happened with Angie Dickinson's first marriage? Angie Dickinson's love life was almost as talked about as her acting career, and for good reason. It was a mix of whirlwind romance, heartbreaks, and enduring friendships. Over the years, she was married twice and linked to some of the most powerful men in entertainment, including a complicated, years-long affair with Frank Sinatra. Her first marriage was to football player Gene Dickinson in 1952. They met when she was around 18 and attending Glendale College. At the time, she was still known as Angie Brown. Gene, a quiet, good-looking athlete with a kind personality, quickly won her heart. According to Angie, their connection was immediate. She described him as cute, quiet, and not pushy, and said that his personality stood out as wonderful. They spent nearly every free moment together, and just 10 months after meeting, they got married in a traditional ceremony in Burbank, surrounded by both their families. But while the wedding looked like a fairy tale, the reasons behind it were more complicated. Angie would later admit she married Gene mostly to escape her difficult home life. She had been living with her family, including an alcoholic father, and saw marriage as a way out. Not long after the wedding, the reality of married life began to sink in. Angie started to feel disconnected and unhappy. As her career began to blossom and her world expanded, her relationship with Gene began to feel increasingly out of place. She confessed that the divorce was one of the hardest moments of her life, not just because of the heartbreak, but because she knew she was hurting someone who hadn't wronged her. Gene, she insisted, was a grand guy, but they had been a wrong twosome. Their worlds simply stopped aligning. Angie explained that when life changes, so do a person's interests, and in her case, those changes left Gene behind. He no longer fit into the lifestyle she was growing into. Still, despite the separation, the two remained close. Angie recalled that even after they went their separate ways, she and Gene stayed on friendly terms. When Gene eventually began dating someone new, the three of them even went on a camping trip together, a rare kind of peace between exes. Years later, Angie moved on and married composer Burt Bacharach in 1965. Their relationship was glamorous and high-profile, but also complex. They had a daughter together, Nikki Bacharach, and for a while, the couple represented the perfect blend of music and film royalty. But the pressures of fame and personal challenges eventually took their toll. Angie and Burt separated in 1976 and finalized their divorce in 1981. In between those two marriages, and even after, Angie was romantically linked to several prominent men. One of the most enduring relationships of her life was her on-and-off affair with Frank Sinatra. It lasted for years, and while the full details were always kept somewhat private, it was widely believed that they shared a deep connection. She also reportedly dated Johnny Carson and Larry King, among others, adding even more intrigue to her already colorful romantic history. From her youthful escape into marriage with Gene, to the passionate and high-stakes relationship with Burt, and the long, complicated friendship-turned-romance with Sinatra, Angie Dickinson's love life mirrored the drama of her screen roles. But through it all, one thing remained clear. She was always in charge of her own story. Angie Dickinson's messiest marriage yet. Angie Dickinson may have played a tough cop on screen, but in real life, she was devoted to the people she loved, especially her second husband, Burt Bacharach. Their marriage lasted 15 years, which is no small feat in Hollywood. And for much of that time, she put her family above her career. Angie once confessed she had been crazy about Burt. When they got married in 1965, he was already an award-winning composer with hits like What the World Needs Now Is Love and I Say a Little Prayer under his belt. Just a year into their marriage, they welcomed their only child, Nikki, but the joy of becoming parents was quickly clouded by heartbreak. Nikki was born 3 months premature, weighing just 1 pound and 10 ounces. Doctors didn't expect her to survive. The early months of Nikki's life were full of fear and uncertainty. Angie remembered watching her baby closely, hour by hour, and celebrating every ounce she gained. Nikki did survive, but she faced many challenges. She had vision problems and was later diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Angie knew right away that her daughter would need more care than most. That realization changed everything. Angie began turning down roles in major films and instead took smaller TV projects that allowed her to stay closer to home. She even passed on the part of Hot Lips Houlihan in MASH, a role that could have taken her career in a new direction. But nothing mattered more to her than being present for her daughter, and for Burt. In 1974, Angie landed the role of Pepper Anderson in Policewoman, a groundbreaking TV series that made her a household name. As the show gained popularity, her star power soared, just as Burt's career hit a rough patch. Around that time, He was involved in a legal dispute with Dionne Warwick. The pressure was growing, and their marriage began to shift. Despite being the bigger star in the relationship, Angie worked hard to keep the family together. She avoided working overtime or on weekends, and even asked to leave the policewoman set early so she could go home and cook dinner for Bert and Nikki. Her co-star, Earl Holliman, once pointed out how difficult it was for her. She wanted a successful show, but she also wanted to be a good wife and mother. Angie had always been honest about how she felt. Before Policewoman, she had admitted she would hate to be more famous than her husband. Yet, that's exactly what happened. Still, she made sacrifices, more than he did, to keep their marriage going. At one point, the couple decided to live separately. Angie called it a weird kind of separation. They still considered themselves married, but they were dating other people. Bert spent most of his time at their beach house in Del Mar, while Angie stayed in their Beverly Hills home. She once described it this way: Bert went out with women, and she went out with men, but she still saw herself as his wife. Very much married and still in love. Even as the relationship became more distant, she held on to the bond they shared. In 1981, after 5 years of living apart, they finally divorced. Angie partly blamed herself, saying that if she were in Bert's shoes, she would have left too. The long hours she spent filming Policewoman had taken a toll. Bert eventually remarried, tying the knot with fellow composer Carol Bayer Sager. Angie was genuinely happy for him. She admitted that he needed someone who understood him better and shared his creative world, something he had often told her she didn't. Nikki, Angie once noted, had inherited her father's love for music. She liked playing the drums and, in many ways, was nothing like her mother. Angie remembered her daughter as someone who never wore makeup and once said they'd never be equally feminine. Even after their split, Angie kept some of Bert's photos around the house. Over time, they stopped seeing each other, but the connection never fully disappeared. Their relationship had been full of highs and lows, love and pain, but also real devotion. Angie may have played the strong, independent woman on TV, and she certainly was, but behind the scenes, she was also a woman who gave everything for the people she loved. While Angie's relationship with Burt Bacharach lasted 15 years, there is one man she was with for nearly as long. The real truth about Frank Sinatra and Angie Dickinson's relationship. Frank Sinatra might have been married 4 times, but according to Angie Dickinson, the love story that could have changed everything never made it to the altar. Their on and off romance lasted for years, filled with passion, deep connection, and a strong friendship, but never marriage, and that was by choice. Their story began in 1953 on the set of the Colgate Comedy Hour. Sinatra was already a star, and Dickinson was just starting out. Backstage, he asked if she was attached. She told him yes, she was married at the time, but he still asked for her number, and she gave it to him. Years later, they appeared together in Ocean's 11, where Dickinson played Beatrice, the wife of Sinatra's character, Danny Ocean. That same year, she divorced her first husband, Gene Dickinson, and her connection with Sinatra only deepened. Dickinson would later share that Sinatra was the most important man in her life. Their relationship stretched over many years, sometimes romantic, sometimes just close friends, but always meaningful. She described their bond as something special. They had talked about marriage around 1964, but neither was really committed to the idea. They were so comfortable with each other that making it official didn't feel necessary. Dickinson admitted she wasn't eager to take on the challenges that came with marrying someone like Sinatra. His late-night lifestyle didn't suit her. He was often out until 6 a.m., while she preferred something a bit quieter. She adored him, was even crazy about him. But being his wife was a different matter entirely. There was also another issue standing in the way. Sinatra once mentioned he didn't want to marry an actress. Dickinson could understand that. In fact, she agreed. She wouldn't wish that life on anyone. She remembered not even wanting him to propose because she didn't want to have to say no. Telling Sinatra no wasn't something she wanted to face. Ironically, he ended up marrying actresses anyway. Ava Gardner before her and Mia Farrow after. But with Dickinson, the connection never faded, even without rings or vows. They remained close until his death in 1998, proving that their relationship was never just about romance. It was rooted in something deeper. Looking back, Dickinson speaks of Sinatra with warmth and admiration. He was, without a doubt, the love of her life. She remembers smiling whenever she thinks of him. His voice, his charm, his screen presence. To her, he was extraordinary. He could act, he could sing, and while he didn't always take artistic risks, she believed he had the talent to sing anything. She described him as difficult and wonderful, brave and foolish, a mix of contradictions, but unforgettable all the same. Dickinson's life moved on. She later married Burt Bacharach and had a daughter, but Sinatra, with all his brilliance and chaos, left a lasting place in her heart, one she never tried to replace. And when Sinatra died in 1998, it truly broke Angie's heart. But Sinatra wouldn't be the only loved one Angie would lose. Years later, she lost her only daughter to suicide. How Angie Dickinson lost her only child. Nicky Bacharach lived a life filled with love, confusion, and quiet heartbreak. Born to two of the most famous names in Hollywood, Angie Dickinson and Burt Bacharach, she seemed destined for a privileged life. But behind closed doors, Nicky struggled with challenges that neither her parents nor the world fully understood. Nicky did not learn to speak until she was 3, and doctors believed she was autistic. But by the age of 4, she showed rapid development and became a child prodigy on the piano, often making up fast rhythms while seated at the keyboard. She excelled in gymnastics and ballet and was frequently involved in horseback riding and scuba diving. Angie believed Nicky was a normal child, but her husband was concerned about her behavior. From a young age, it was clear something was different. Nicky was slow to talk, sensitive to noise, and easily overwhelmed. She clung to random objects and had trouble connecting with other kids. Her parents worried, but the term Asperger's syndrome wasn't even on their radar. It hadn't yet entered public awareness. It wasn't until Nicky was in her 30s that Dickinson came across a magazine article and saw her daughter clearly for the first time. The behaviors, the sensitivities, the social struggles, they all matched. But by then, it felt like too little, too late. Throughout her life, Nicky had been labeled, misunderstood, and mishandled. She was highly intelligent, yet the world kept trying to mold her into something she wasn't. A therapist once told Dickinson it would take 9 to 18 months to get Nicky well, but Nicky ended up staying in an institution for nearly 10 years. She tried her best. She studied geology in college, took trips around the world with her mother, and kept chasing peace wherever she could find it. She fell in love with Tahiti, visiting over 30 times. The island's stillness gave her some relief from the chaos in her head. But even that wasn't enough. The world was often too loud, too confusing, too much. Nicky would openly talk about suicide, not just to her family, but even to people she barely knew. Dickinson once revealed that her daughter had become obsessed with the thought of her death, and, more heartbreakingly, her mother's death. Nicky called Dickinson her soulmate. Her biggest fear wasn't just facing the world, it was facing it alone. Burt Bacharach recalled the pain of watching Nicky suffer. He once said he believed giving her space would help, that sending her away would fix what was broken. But later, he admitted he was wrong. He wished someone had told him to stop trying to heal her and just let her be. In the end, Nikki made the decision on her own. On January 4, 2007, she took her life at the age of 40. Her family released a statement that reflected both sorrow and admiration. They shared that she had quietly and peacefully ended her life to escape the chaos Asperger's had caused in her brain. They remembered her love for cats, earthquakes, stars, and science, and the peace she finally found. For Dickinson and Bacharach, Nikki was not just a daughter. She was a force of nature. Beautiful, brilliant, and unique, but always at odds with a world that never quite knew what to do with her. Even now, memories of her came in waves, unexpected, tender, and sometimes painful. Which Angie Dickinson films were your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.